Hello and welcome to another episode of Stop Motion Challenge, where we take figures and we review them based on how well they're going to do in a stop motion animation. Today we're going to be looking at Frieza and Optimus Prime. Now this is quite an odd matchup, but in most of these episodes I want to create matchups that you wouldn't normally see, and I think it'll make for a more unique battle. Now the Optimus Prime figure in particular is really cool. He comes with his stand. He comes with two weapons, not just this one. There's another one that you can attach to his arm. He comes with this whole flight gear, his flight tech. And overall, he's a great figure. He has really cool finish in all his paint, really bright red, bright blue. I like this design in particular. This is the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen or Dark of the Moon. Both of them are good designs. I don't like the new Optimus Prime design, the one for Age of Extinction. I think he doesn't look anything. The truck is gone. So it's a really stupid design if you ask me. So this design is really cool. So now we're gonna take a look at Frieza. Frieza is my favorite character from the Dragon Ball Z universe. Ever since I first saw that when I was about 10 years old, I believe. So this toy is a very good representation of Frieza's final form. It's quite accurate. It has interchangeable hands, interchangeable feet, so you can position him in his little base over here. He has different tails. He has two heads. So overall, it's a great toy for display. Now, Optimus Prime has 20 points of articulation. This is usually the average points of articulation you're going to find on a toy. It has joints where there should be the feet, the knees, the legs. It has it has two joints here in that. It has 2 points of articulation here in that it can turn like this and also go up and down like that. So that's a plus. I believe the shoulders can do the same. So that's very good. And the head also moves. You know, even if you count his flight gear, it would probably be several more points of articulation. But since I didn't really use those in the stop motion animation, I'm not going to count them. So in points of articulation, Optimus Prime gets a B. So Frieza has 22 points of articulation. He has the knee one, foot one, all the ones you'd want. Like Optimus, his shoulder joint also turns like this and goes up and down here, which is great. Full range of head motion, as you can see. Talk about that later. Now, in terms of points of articulation, I'll give it a B. Well, they withstand pretty well. Some of the joints held quite well. There are some that are a little loose, for example, this one. Now, if we go over here and look at this joint in particular, you'll notice how it's a snap joint. Do you see that? You can also hear it, I think. But so when you have a snap joint like this, it can be good and bad. It can be good in that it'll hold the character in place. You know, if I put him like this, I know that joint's not gonna move. It can be bad in that since it's a stepping motion, you see all that distance that you're already covering just by moving him from here to here. So in a stop motion, you cannot position him in between those two frames. You see? So if you want to put him in between here and there, you would have to hold him, and you can't. So that's not very good. And the arms also have step. You see this? So step joints are great in that they hold together very well, but they're particularly bad for stop motion because, again, you don't have control over what is going on in between those two locking points for the joint. This joint is very thin. Now I imagine that if I put this guy through I don't know, a 10-minute stop motion animation, I don't know if he'd make it through it, because all the times that I'd be moving this joint up and down and left and right and everything, it would probably break it. And the same goes for most of these joints. So for that, it gets a C+. As you saw earlier, when I tried to move his head broke off. That's because that joint isn't particularly good. All the other joints, however, hold up pretty well, except for the tail. The tail is a particularly loose joint, and that's problematic because when I'm trying to stand this guy up, I'm going to rely on his tail to keep him propped up, and that tail continually would just loosen up and he would fall down. The ankles here were particularly weak in that they wouldn't hold his position that well when he would be standing in a certain way or whatever. So because of that, in terms of joint durability, I'm going to give it a D. Big feet equals great balance, right? So Optimus Prime has particularly good balance because of that. Even if I just position him there, I didn't even need to pose him. I didn't even need to do much to him, and he's already standing, and he's not going to fall. Even if I bend him over like that, yeah, he still won't fall. See? Let's see if I outstretch his arms like this, then he's probably going to fall, yes. But even then, I can just balance him out like that, and ta-da, he's not gonna fall down. So that's great. That's really good balance that you want. And his lower body also weighs more than the upper body. So that's why he also has particularly good balance. He did, however, fall a few times. I imagine that with clay he probably wouldn't fall, but I'd never put clay on this guy because he's too delicate and precious a toy. But with clay he probably wouldn't fall. He did fall a few times. His balance isn't perfect, but it's almost there. So because it has pretty great balance, I'm going to give it a B+ in balance. So balancing wise, Frieza did present several problems. I already mentioned earlier his tail joint is particularly loose, so that wouldn't let me put him up. But the tail does other things in that, just like Godzilla, if I try and position him or stand him up at all, he's gonna fall back down. See, this is horrible for balance. The tail is just a nightmare for stop motion animations. Because he was falling several times and his balance is not particularly great, I have to give his balance a grade of a C. His range of motion, if I put him in a position sort of like this, you can see how far I can take these joints. Look at that. So the toy has really good range of motion. Look at that. That's a great pose. And he can bend, these will bend all the way almost. Same with the arms. They'll go really far back. So if he wants to charge up for a punch or something, or come down for like a sumo wrestling tackle there. However, we still go back to the delicate joints, and that some of them do have a bit of looseness in them. Now because of this inhibits exactly which positions I can put him in, and for that I have to give him a B+. But he still has great range of motion. So he is on the small side in terms of scale. So you can't really get extreme positions out of him. He does bend pretty far, as you can see. So he can, get down and do like a sliding kick or something if his foot doesn't fall off in the middle of it. His arms can't really go that far in. You can see this prevents it from going in too deep, so he wouldn't be able to cross his arms, for example. That wouldn't work very well. He could say, hey, it's me. So because he doesn't have that great range of motion, he's also going to get a D for that. Alright, so let's start with Optimus Prime's grade. He's able to outstretch his arms quite enough for a very good fight. He has a great center of balance because of those big feet, and you know, he didn't fall on me that many times. He does have some weak joints, which obviously will present issues if you were to animate with him in a prolonged amount of time. But overall, pretty decent character for stop motion, I'd say. So for that, I'm going to give it a B+. As for Frieza, well, Frieza has terrible balance. That tail is killer. You can't really get him into any kind of neat pose or anything whatsoever. His range of motion is super inhibited. His joints are particularly loose in several parts. He's a great toy. He's a great toy for display, but in terms of stop motion, it's just not going to work. I have to give it a D. Still better than Godzilla and Mega King Ghidorah, but nowhere near a decent toy. I would not recommend Frieza for a stop motion animation. I would recommend Optimus Prime. And with that, we can now see who wins the battle between Optimus Prime and Frieza.